All right, welcome back to the Chapter 27 Flipped Classroom. In this section of the PowerPoint, we're going to be going over the Ottomans, or excuse me, the Ottomans. We already went over the Ottomans. In this section of the PowerPoint, we're going to be going over the Safavids, located about here. And we will also be covering the decline of the empires because the decline that we'll be discussing is more relevant for the Ottoman and the Safavids, especially the Safavids. So we already covered those slides with the Ottomans, so here are the Safavids. The Safavids were started by Safa al-Din, and he actually was originally a Sufi, but he was an orphan, and because his parents were killed by his enemies, and as he became a military leader and galvanized his troops, he converted to Shiism. And as a, a Shia, he said that as a Shia, he basically said that he was the 12th Imam. Now, in Shiism, there are supposedly 12 infallible imams after Muhammad, and 11 of them were killed. The 12th imam goes into hiding to be ready to take power. And when he took on Shiism, he started to wear this distinctive red hat called a Quizelbash or Quizilbash, and he was so there's a question as to whether he converted because the people in Iran were Shia already, or was he really making, did he really have a change of faith? Because he named the empire the Safavid Empire, which is after a Sufi thinker. This um, this empire almost did not exist because of the Battle of Chaldiran in 1514. This was under Ishmael, and Ishmael became Shah, and he and the Ottoman Sultan Selim the Grim had a tiff over, the correct way to practice Islam. Should it be Sunni or Shia? And the Ottomans attacked the Safavids, and the heavy use of Ottoman gunpowder technology gave them the upper hand. Ishmael escaped, but it ignited 2 centuries of conflict. And the Safavids were almost entirely crushed at this battle. The greatest Shah of the Safavid Empire is Shah Abbas the Great, and he revitalized the Safavid Empire by reforming administration, basically rooting out corruption. He expanded trading contacts by sending out envoys. And he also expanded the empire militarily. Not into the Ottoman Empire, but to the north. So some of the trading contacts that he expanded into would be the British East India Company and the Dutch East India Company. And the French East India Company. All right, so while the Safavids were nowhere near as big as the Ottomans, they were still very wealthy, but not as large. Women had similar roles in their empire. They similarly had some issues with the Columbian Exchange. As I said, they were reigniting trade with the European joint stock companies. through the Indian Ocean basin, but they lost a lot of revenue when those land routes fell. They saw population growth. They had religious diversity with Zoroastrians and Christians, as I said with the first PowerPoint. And their capital city had a lot spent on it. The most famous is probably the mosque there, the Shah's Mosque. This thing is something I would love to see sometime in my life. Look at this beautiful turquoise color of the Turks. Um, this beautiful tiling, the intricate design. These are verses from the Quran with that azure blue. Um, Here's the dome over here, and it's also covered with just these insanely intricate tiles. I mean, it's so beautiful. And then it's juxtaposed to this big bazaar, and then that opens up into a huge square. Just so you see the tiling of one of the domes, it is just insane. And you can see the screens on the windows, which were designed to let in light but also keep out the heat. Quite amazing. So very, very, very wealthy. Okay, so looking at the decline of these two empires, the Ottomans and the Safavids, the first thing was that over time they stopped expanding as much, and this meant that they didn't have any new groups to tax, and so therefore that led to less wealth to pay the bills. Also, they really fell behind in war technology. This was as opposed to the Europeans. And this was really because of cultural conservatism and the power of clerics. Clerics started to be less open to new ideas as society started to become different because of the Columbian Exchange, and they started to shut out new ideas, similar to what was going on in China and Japan. And this led to them falling behind the Europeans. Political corruption was also an issue for them. As empires wear on, they begin to get less, they function more poorly. They started to rely on foreign merchants like the Dutch East India Company, the British East India Company, and the French East India Company instead of land routes. And we're really going to see this in the 20th century, or in the 1800s with the Ottomans. They, again, this religious and cultural conservatism really harmed the tolerance that had made their empires function well. So you start to see people going against these religious minorities, which is not good because oftentimes these people hold jobs within the society, and so number one, you're harming your talented population, and number two, you are potentially creating environment for revolts. And just as a good example of this, the Ottomans and the Safavids banned the printing press. They had the technology for printing, but they decided that they did not want to use it. So this, because they really valued their calligraphy, which is quite beautiful, as you can see, but this was not a good idea. I mean, it was not modernizing, so they just fell further and further behind. So they were lazy through luxury. They were isolating themselves, which compounded the problem. They had unproductive wars. They were militarily behind. There were many, many reasons for their decline. And that is all I have for you on the decline of the Ottomans and the Safavids, and partially the Mughals, but also the Safavid Empire.